And welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, the historical action and adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harffy.
And my name is Justin Hill.
Well done. You didn't need to check your name. Or were you reading it? Were you reading it at the
I
same
am
time?
reading actually, yeah.
I thought, as I said that, I thought actually you were reading it, weren't you?
That's my reading voice.
Yes. So, welcome back, everybody. And if it's your first time on the podcast, or listening to the podcast, or watching us on YouTube, welcome. I hope you enjoy it and stay around. And if you do enjoy, please leave a review wherever you are watching this. If you don't enjoy it, then don't leave a review. Tell your friends and neighbors and family about it. Get them to watch it. Get them to listen to it. Spread the word. And if you know someone in a position of power that can give us lots of money to make this go viral, then by all means pass on the news to whoever you know at the top echelons of the podcasting world. And if you haven't got someone that can actually throw us to stardom, then but you want to contribute in a small way, then you could look at our Patreon and sign up and get things like exclusive bonus episodes every month and get to interact with us and ask us questions and all other bits and bobs. So have a look at Patreon and see what you think. And you can also, if you don't feel like doing that, you can even leave us a tip or buy us a beer, buy us a coffee. All the notes for the links for these things are in the show notes and the descriptions. And that's it for me. I'm not going to ask for any more things. So how are you doing, Justin?
Yeah, good. I just passed the 35,000 word mark in this novel I'm working on. Yeah, and
Jeepers.
I was a bit stuck yesterday of where I was going to go and what I was going to write about. And then I suddenly realized, okay, I I started with part two. So
Yeah,
essentially part one is finished. And I
nice.
thought, okay, here I am. I'm now moving into act two of this story. So once I realized that, then I was kind of away, and yeah,
That's
it's just
quite
going
good.
very
It's
well.
like that'd be like I was thinking I was reading a book actually the other day, literally yesterday, that actually did that, jumped to part two, and they've moved. It's set in the ancient time of ancient Rome, and they've moved halfway across the continent in between the parts. And I thought
Hmm.
it's quite a good way of not having to describe the arduous journey. Which obviously, if you start describing every single element of that journey, which I have done in some of my books, that takes up a whole novel. I've ended up writing a whole novel. In fact, I wrote two novels, which was basically just traveling from Britain to
A to
Rome.
B.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
if you start writing the detail, you start then getting embroiled in adventures and things.
Well, I was
So
thinking
yeah,
about it this morning for my video, and it's a hugely kind of effective way of conveying information to the reader
yeah,
because they really want to know that they've got a story and the writer knows what they're doing. And often, kind of you worry about things that aren't clear, and often it's a very simple fix. You just tell the reader, it could be where, as at the top of the chapter you write, York,
yeah,
1013, and then you give so much information. It's very simple, very straightforward, and you don't need to show everything. So,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, one of the things that I do in keeping in the Benicia Chronicles books that they're always multiple POV.
Hmm.
So there's always three or four, depending on the book. There's always a few different points of view, and I always make it a point that I don't do the thing of putting at the top and saying Bearbrand and then having the chapter underneath. So it would just be next chapter. But I always make a point of in the very first line of every chapter, I include the name of the point of view character. So I make
Yeah.
it very very clear right from the get
Who?
go whose head you're in.
Have you read George R. R. Martin, Game of
Yes,
Thrones? Yeah, he's
yes.
brilliant at
But
that
he
because
does tell you though.
he does.
He does put
But
a telling line, tells you whose head you're in.
what he does is he starts every chapter with a really kind of intense personal moment. Number
Yes.
one, where I think it's Cersei is getting her maids are dressing her, and she's sitting there and thinking she dreamt about rats the night before or something like that. But it's a really kind of weird, intense moment, and it's straight
Yeah.
into that character's
I
mindset.
think he writes such massive, big, sprawling books
Hmm.
that I think he basically it's just all stream of consciousness at some point, isn't it? I think he's writing so much that he'll just throw anything that comes into his head into it.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, definitely different to the way I write.
Hmm.
I can't imagine writing such massive things. I mean, yeah, the idea of it would drive me crazy.
Yeah. I think Game of Thrones, I think is one of the books I think, oh, I wish I'd written that. I think to kind of update fantasy in the way he has done. It's very clearly very historical, but I thought it was kind of brilliant in many ways.
I think that, yeah, I mean, I've only read, to be perfectly honest, I've only read the first book.
Mm.
And I've read a bit of the second book, and I just looked and I thought, I'm not going to continue with this whole series. There's no way I'm going to read that many books. But I did find that first book very compelling and really
Yeah,
readable. But
yeah.
I just looked and I thought, oh my goodness. And everybody said to me they get worse. They said they sort of peak by about book 3, and then after that they kind of are not as good.
Yeah, I was
That's
a bit
what.
alarmed because as a novelist, you can when you have to start drawing the story back in again. And I think after 7 books, the story was still expanding,
Well, this
and
is
I
what I
got
think it's more like
he's
a stream of consciousness thing. I think he
yeah.
doesn't. It doesn't feel like he really has full control over where it was
No,
going.
absolutely. I thought he's lost control of this. No
Because if
wonder
you
he
just
hasn't.
keep on following on every single idea that comes into your head, then eventually it's just going to become too big, and you're never going
Yeah,
to.
you've got to start kind of focusing it.
Uh,
Um,
we're talking of focus. I'm impressed with your focus at the moment. You 35,000 words into this new book,
yeah,
when you've always professed to me that you're not a very fast writer, but you seem to be at the moment
yeah.
very,
No, I'm
very
not.
fast. And in the same time that you've written 35,000 words, I don't think I've written any. So,
Well, you're on a very different stage. You
well,
just finished a draft and you've given it over to the beta readers.
yeah. I'm at the stage where I'm kind of planning, but I'm doing a lot of sort of thinking and planning, and it's sort of bits of. I feel like I've got like it's as if someone's like taken a jigsaw puzzle, rubbed all of the bits off, so I can't actually see what's on the jigsaw puzzle, and then it's all inside my head, and it's sort of shaking around every day, and bits of the jigsaw are falling into place, and other bits are all sort of higgledy-piggledy, and I'm trying to work out where they go, and every now and again I pick one up and clean it off, and then go, oh, that's the name of that character. Oh, that character could be the son of that character. And it sort of clicks into place, but that's
Yeah, I
where I'm
think
at the moment.
once you start writing, then ideas, get far more ideas. I have a rough plan for this novel, but now I've actually started writing. I'm still in the easy bit, really. I mean, I've done Act 1, where I'm sort of setting up all the stories. The difficult
Right.
bit is
Yeah.
then kind of
Yeah.
where I'm now trying to do the payoff.
Well,
Um,
because my one is kind of like it's going to be a bit of a thriller, who done it type of thing. I have to have sort of the plot more or less mapped out. Not every single twist and turn, but I've got to understand. I have to. I know some people don't write like this, but I need to understand who's the baddie, why they've done it. Where are they? How is it all going to come together?
hmm.
At least some of that, and that will change a little bit. But I'm doing a lot of that sort of forward planning at the moment, because it's in a different historical context. It's taken me a lot of effort to to unearth all of the detail that I need. But I'm definitely getting there, and it feels like
And
it's.
and today's book must be fabulous research for you.
Yes, today's book will be. Yes, so we'll be talking to Harry Sidebottom very soon, who, of course, is a classical scholar of ancient Rome, and written all these great novels as well about Rome. So yeah, he's going to be brilliant.
Yeah,
But,
and
yeah.
so you're still in the planning stage, and
Yeah.
research. Yeah.
Planning and research, yes. And next week, of course. So by the time this comes out, my new book will have come out. Dominion of Dust is published on the 9th of October.
Wow.
And so yeah, so I'm off to London next week to see my editor and sign some books in
Mhm.
Goldsborough Books, and yeah, I was chatting to someone on a local radio. I got invited out of the blue to speak
So,
about it.
so how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, excited. It's the fourth one in the series, A Time for Swords series,
Hmm.
and this one is about Hunlaf and his colleagues all visiting. Well, it starts off in Cyprus, but then quickly moves to the Holy Land,
Mm.
and they're in search of some holy relics. And there's basically an arms race going on in my book between the Western Roman Empire and Charlemagne, who is vying to become the head of the Roman Empire, or the emperor even, and Irene from Constantinople, who's head of the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium. And so I've got this sort of situation where agents from both sides are kind of chasing down these holy relics, and getting into all sort of skullduggery and trying to sabotage each other and kill each other off, and so there's sort of chases and murders and all sorts of things happening.
Hmm.
as they rush around the Holy Land. And there's also, they get sort of thrown into all sorts of different different situations.
Have you been to Israel?
I have been to Israel
Okay.
a few times because I used to work for an Israeli company, actually.
Hmm.
So I had to go out to the offices there a few times. So I haven't spent a lot of time outside of the city or just the offices working.
Were they in Jerusalem or?
I've been to Jerusalem once, but the offices were near Tel Aviv, so
Yeah.
it was stay in Tel Aviv and just I can't Renana, the city outside of Tel Aviv.
Yeah, my wife was there recently and went to Jerusalem and was just amazed. I mean, it was fascinating.
Yeah, it really
Um,
is.
hmm.
It is, and it's depressing actually what's going on in the Middle East and what has been going on in the Middle East for pretty much forever, really.
Yeah.
It's so sad that things can't. I don't know. It's like it seems like an impossible situation now, and maybe has been for decades or even centuries. But it's sad, but an amazing place. But I mean, now I'm researching even ancient Rome. It was all the same then. It was uprisings of the Jews getting put down, and people getting killed and taken, crushing uprisings, and it was this is all war and terrible stuff going on.
Yeah.
Thousands of Jews being carted back to Rome and thrown into the Colosseum, which of course brings us and helped build the Colosseum, didn't they? It was all built off the money of was it Vespasian?
Yeah.
Who I'm trying to remember which one of the emperors it was that went to Israel at that point, and there was a big uprising. I don't know which one it was now.
Yeah,
I'm sure Harry can tell us. But yes, they. So I think it was all money from the Judean wars that came back, and lots of prisoners of war that built slaves that built the Colosseum.
Wow.
So yes, which is a link to what we're going to be talking about in a bit, which is going to be gladiators. Oh, Harry's actually in the waiting room, just like that,
Oh, wonderful.
as if I planned that. So I'm going to get him in.
Today we're joined by Harry Sidebottom, historian, Oxford lecturer, and internationally best-selling author of The Warrior of Rome and the Throne of Caesars series. His latest book, Those Who Are About to Die, Gladiators and the Roman Mind, dives deep into the brutal, fascinating world of the arena. And today we'll be talking about that, the lure of gladiators, the craft of writing gripping historical fiction, and the stories that have made him one of the most compelling voices in the genre.
Welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords.
Welcome, Harry.
Thank you very much, guys. Very kind of you to ask me to be on the show.
Oh, you're very welcome. So we were just reminiscing before we went live on the recording about how we first met. All three of us were on a panel back in Oxford. I think it was in 2016.
I think it's 15. It was the year 15, I came 16, back to England.
Yeah, it was so like 10 years ago, and it was my first time speaking in public about writing. And Justin was the chair of this talk, and it was about writing battle scenes. And it was you, Harry, and Simon Scarrow, Douglas Jackson, and me. And I was absolutely terrified. But that was when I first met you guys. So it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, we're reunited.
Yeah, and don't worry, I was just as terrified, even though it wasn't my first event.
Well, it's good to know. Yes, it's good to know. I think that adrenaline is always good. And it's probably something that the people that you've written about in this book, adrenaline that is, would probably have quite a lot of. I'm guessing these gladiators before stepping out to the arena. If we get nervous just to talk, I'm guessing as they go out to fight, even though it wasn't always a fight to the death, it would have been pretty hairy. But before we go on to the nitty-gritty of the gladiators, the book, it's set as like 24 hours in the life of the Colosseum or of gladiators in general, the day of how it breaks down and what they do in a 24-hour period. And inspired, you say in the book, by the fall of Robespierre, 24 hours in revolutionary France. What was it about that inspired you to write this book in this way?
Well, The Fall of Robespierre is a brilliant history book. I mean, with serious, profound knowledge and just very well written and accessible. And I read it and I just thought, well, actually, I could use this for Gladiators, because then taking the reader through 24 hours gives a series of windows onto all sorts of things in Roman culture that we wouldn't automatically associate with gladiators. So dining, body shape, sleep, dreams, sex, and all the way through. And yeah, I hope it's worked.
Yes, well, it definitely has. Yeah, it's really good. It's good fun. And you cover a huge range, as you say, of not just, I think if anybody picks up the book thinking it's going to be just about gladiators, I think it's much broader than that. You cover a lot of daily life and the politics and the sort of the whole way that Rome, or the whole of ancient Rome, really. You cover lots of I was going to say imperial Rome, but really you talk about the whole, hundreds and hundreds of years of the different approaches to things like the gladiators, but also it covers many other aspects of their life. So how do you think this book differs from previous scholarship or portrayals of gladiators?
Right. I think, first of all, the structure, obviously, and the fact that it is so wide-ranging that it actually tries to put gladiators in their Roman cultural context in a much more rounded way than most books do. Most books, especially popular books, just concentrate on the king, the slashing, and the killing on the sand. But gladiatorial combat was just one element. Okay, it's the high point, but it's still just one element in 24 hours of entertainment. And I think the difference of Those Who Are About to Die, my book, is you actually get the sense of where gladiators fit in the whole of culture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I found it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I love the fact you subtitle it Gladiators in the Roman Mind, because it really does go into all kinds of aspects of how gladiators featured in kind of Roman culture, because we obsess about gladiators because they're so different. And I mean, I guess what we find so compelling about gladiators is literally the life and death, aspect of it. And the Romans seem to have the same fascination. I mean, I love the book. It goes into all kinds of details. With people, kind of the dreams that you might have about gladiators, or how these are important. So the ideas of gladiators seems to kind of really pervade Roman society in a way that you really bring out in this book.
Thank you. Yeah, the dreams. Actually, that's one of my favorite chapters in the book. We have one surviving manual from the ancient world on how to be a dream diviner by a man called Artemidorus of Daldis, 2nd century AD. And Artemidorus claims he's collected genuine, real case studies of dreams, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them. And yeah, for gladiators, the fascinating thing is that people seem to spend a lot of time dreaming about gladiators. And of course, you can only dream about stuff you can think about. And even more interesting to me is that when he's explaining your dream about a gladiator, he doesn't bother to explain how the gladiator fights or anything. He just assumes his contemporary audience have a really quite serious technical grasp of gladiatorial combat. And my favorite bit there is the fact that his long section on dreams about gladiators is addressed to unmarried men. And the type of gladiator you dream you're fighting represents the character of the woman you'll marry. And in this deeply sexist world, there are 9 examples and 8 of them are bad. But there again, being married is pretty bad in Artemidorus' worldview anyway. I mean, if you dream you're crucified and you're unmarried, again, that shows you're going to get married, because a man is bound to his wife like a crucified man to the cross.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great image.
So
great and very wrong image.
What's the good gladiator to fight for an unmarried man then?
Oh, Matthew, the irony of this is it's hidden in a corruption in the text. We don't know. So you've got this whole list of 8 types of gladiators we know about. The Esidarius who fights in a chariot. That means your wife will be rich and lazy. The Thracian type, that means she'll be devious and cunning. The Retiarius type, which means she'll be wanton and promiscuous and sleep with all your friends. And then you get to the one good one. And of course, it's good in Roman sense of how a man imagines a wife. So docile, subservient, etc. And we don't know what type of gladiator it is. It's just the manuscript's corrupt. We can't tell, which is a lovely irony, really.
And there were some very clear kind of examples of gladiators. I mean, I remember the pictures of, is it the Thracian with the armored one arm and a helmet and fighting the Retiarius, who has the net and the trident. Was there a very sort of specific set of kind of gladiatorial types?
There was. In the broadest of terms, there's the big shield ones. So that would be people like the Murmillo and the Secutor, and the small shield ones, which is the Thracian, the Hoplomachus. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, because he was a really miserable man, Marcus Aurelius. And to be fair, these were notebooks he didn't want to be published. He thanks his tutor for making sure he was never a fan of either big or small shields. But then within the big and the small shields, you do get these very distinct types. Having said all of which, a lot of popular books get too dogmatic about the types, because there are types in art, ancient art, that we can't match up to literary descriptions. And vice versa. You know, there are literary mentions of a type of gladiator who we can't identify in the visual images. And I think the thing here is that every giver of the games had to aim for novelty, and they could change the equipment of gladiators, which evolves over time, and seemingly different parts of the empire prefer different types of gladiators. So it's unwise to be too hardline dogmatic about that is a Thracian or that is a whatever, because the reality might have been rather more fluid.
That's interesting. You mentioned portrayals in art, and you make me wonder, in your opinion, which is the most accurate portrayal of real life gladiators in fiction, be it movies or TV or some other form of art?
That's a really tough question. It's probably not in any film I've seen. I mean, I think the problem with Hollywood's films is every gladiatorial combat is always a mass combat. There are always loads of guys in the arena fighting. And quite clearly, I mean, this did happen, but it was incredibly rare. What usually happened was a duel between a match pair of the same or deliberately contrasting equipment. And there was a ranking system of gladiators, the Palus system. You start at the bottom at 5, work your way up, 4, 3, 2, 1 is the top. And it seems almost certain that gladiators always fought only one level up or down. They either fought the same level of expertise, one up or one down. So
which makes sense. Because so it's like a ladder system that you could then get promoted up effectively, I guess, like a...
Yeah, I guess. And one of the big things that's missing in our evidence, I discuss in the book, is how did you get promoted up? Clearly, guys do. I mean, is it down to the whim of the guy who runs your troop of gladiators? Is it based on results? Is it based on just natural aptitude? We just don't know. It's got to be a problem.
The logical thing would be somehow related to results. You'd imagine, wouldn't you? If you beat the guy in a level above you, then you 2 or 3 times you get promoted up to that level. I mean,
it must be, mustn't it? Unless it's some weird favoritism with the owner of the troop, I guess. But yeah, I'm with you. It must be that. And of course,
because otherwise they'd get killed too quickly, wouldn't they? If you promoted them too fast.
Yeah, it
would be an inverse favoritism. I mean, you say, well, I don't like this guy very much. Put him up to level 1. Boom, he'd be out.
I think there is one anecdote in a completely non-historical place. It's in a fictitious legal speech, training for a courtroom lawyer, and the guy whose the words are put in his mouth complains that he has been mismatched deliberately because the guy giving the games wants him to get killed.
You can see how that would happen if you slagged off the giver of the games or something, or he found out you'd shagged his wife, and he's like, right, we'll stick him up to right. He's fighting the number 1 gladiator.
Yeah, it's not a ticket to a long, successful life of retirement, is it?
No, but the more I read about ancient Rome, the more I think that's the kind of thing that happened all the time, because they were always, they all wanted to have sex with gladiators, didn't they? All the rich senatorial wives and everybody. So
Certainly, yeah, according to all the male writers like Juvenal, there's something really sexy about gladiators. I mean, Juvenal's very funny. And I think I say somewhere in the book that if you're terribly delicate and precious, you might not want to read him because it will just upset you. He doesn't share our attitudes and values on almost anything. And he's a very dark, black humorist. And I mean, he's anti everything. You know, he's anti women, he's anti foreigners, he's anti nouveau riche people, he's anti aristocrats. He just loathes everyone pretty much. But yeah, as he puts it somewhere, rich women just love the sword. And of course, yeah, that's a pun, isn't it? Gladius is slang for penis. I mean, he's just basically saying they like cock.
Yeah, well, fair enough. But
as I said, your book starts the night before for the evening meal, which was a public event. And something that really struck me was you were talking about how gladiators were often quite fat. We think of them as kind of, honed Greek statues, with their abs sprayed on, like, kind of the Spartans in 300. But they were actually quite fat for many kind of good reasons. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Well, for a start, they're vegetarian. They're a special almost everyone was vegetarian, obviously, because most of the population live on or below subsistence level. And it's not about being nice to animals, or it's not about saving the planet. It's about being so poor you can't afford meat. But gladiators were a special brand of vegetarian. They ate a stew of beans and barley and pulses, which was called sagina, which literally translates as stuffing. And yeah, it has connotations of animal feed because these guys are the lowest. And it was designed to bulk them up. I mean, to try and put it in modern medical terms, it was designed to give them, as you can tell, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'll try and get through this sentence in the right way, to give them a thick layer of subcutaneous fat so that they could take a wound and bleed in a nice visual way, but the blade was less likely to puncture a vital organ. Yeah. So yeah, they're big guys, and they also they're weird sex symbols because they're pretty tubby guys. They're more, kind of, I'll do the joke again, Russell Crowe now than Russell Crowe then. God, that Aussie actor's going to hate me if he ever hears this. But hey, we're all older. I'm heavier too, mate.
He said, I just saw a thing yesterday on social media, actually, a photo of him. He's lost loads of weight, but he's got a very young wife, and he's probably taking Ozempic or something. So he's losing loads of weight.
Oh God, there's hope. There's hope for me too. Then I mean, not getting a young wife. I mean, just getting thin again. Yeah. So gladiators are really tubby guys. They also had incredibly bad teeth because of the diet, and which probably gave them very bad breath. They also were quite often tattooed, and of course, in Rome, tattooing is a sign of barbarity. They are slightly deformed, like a tennis player. The repetitive hard training builds up one arm and one shoulder, and there's some literary references to gladiators with one arm longer than the other. So you've got these fat guys with bad teeth and bad breath and tattoos and silly haircuts we know about.
And scars, I guess.
And Juvenal says the women love those.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe that's it. I mean, the gladiators, they're a million miles from the classical ideal of male sexual beauty and desirability. But maybe it's just they're the ultimate rough trade.
I'm guessing, for the aristocratic woman who's got her betogered husband who comes back from the Senate and he's like been reading and studying law or something. It's a very, very different. He comes back arguing about, and Cicero said this in the state, today or whatever. And she's like, yeah, I just want to go and see the big Mamillo bloke who's.
It made me. It made me think of the sumo wrestlers because they have a special stew as well, and that kind of sense of being fattened up.
And they're incredibly strong as well. The sumo are very fit. In bursts of energy, and so I'm guessing, very similar.
Gladiators. There's gladiatorial cemetery from Ephesus, and this is one we know it's gladiators because their tombstones are gladiators there with the skeletons, and they've got incredibly high level of calcium in their bones and a very strong bone structure to support the weight. and for that burst of energy. Most of these fights can only last 10 minutes.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, it's an interesting thing you said before about the subcutaneous fat and wanting them to bleed profusely and sort of very visually, but hopefully not be killed very quickly. And I think one of the things that I think is a bit of a myth around gladiators, certainly one that I always had thought in in the past, was that gladiators basically it was always to the death. You sort of have this idea, and then you start thinking about it logically and think, but it can't be the case because obviously you wouldn't train someone up just to kill them, and it doesn't make any sense. But can you want to talk a little bit about the likelihood of death and how frequent it was?
Yeah, sure. Because you're right. I mean, in popular image, the popular mind now, it's always to the death, isn't it? And there were some fights to the death, but they're very unusual. Usually, you fight. They fought to the finger, and one of the symbols of submission is to hold one finger up, either hand, bit like a cricket umpire declaring you out. The chances of death, well, modern estimates, there's a very bloody-minded French scholar, Georges Ville, who decided it was 1 in 4, and a much more Pacific South African, Kathy Coleman, 1 in 20. I played around with some of the inscriptions, actually graffiti and paintings from Pompeii, as in one of the almost complete lists we can read, and it's 1 in 8. So yeah, it's a 1 in 8 chance of dying, but that only makes any sense if we know how often they fought each year and how long they had to fight for in terms of how long were they in the schools. And here we're really generalizing from, in each case, one bit of evidence. So we've got hundreds of gladiators' tombstones, but only one that I've found not only says how many fights the guy had, but how long he'd been in the gladiatorial school. And it's 5 fights in 4 years, so just over 1 a year. Yeah. Unless, of course, they've missed out the one when he dies, in which case it's 1.5 a year. But you don't fight probably very often. And the Emperor Hadrian passed a rescript. This is incredibly specific. He was asked in the petition and response model, Emperor, what should we do about Spanish cattle rustlers? And he said they should be condemned to gladiatorial schools, and they can be condemned to gladiatorial school for 5 years, but they only have to fight for 3 of them. Okay, so we now generalize this out to the whole of the empire because we don't have any other evidence. But if we go with my 1 in 8 chance of dying, and you only serve for 3 years, and you only fight, 3, 4, 5 times, the chances of survival actually become quite good. And that kind of helps explain why free men volunteered.
Yeah, there was lots of money in it, wasn't there? They could get paid quite well. I mean, not if you've been put in there as a prisoner, but if a freed man joined a troop, they could become quite rich out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you win your bout, you get the symbolic palm of victory, but the giver of the games is expected to give you a salver, a dish with coins in. And Horace the poet talks about gladiators who've retired with so much money they've bought huge country estates. I mean, that's highly unlikely to be unbiased reportage, but it shows that Horace expected his readership to believe it was possible for a gladiator who was really successful, came out the other end to make a lot of money. And I guess they maybe like being sex symbols. Although, if you're Horace, the reason guys volunteer is really simple. You're just a morally bad person. There you are.
He's like the opposite of Juvenal, then, was he?
Not. They both think gladiators are really morally bad people. I think Horace says something like he's got a very specific type of morally bad bloke in mind. It's a rich young man who's wasted all his inheritance on women, drink, gambling, and fish dinners. And there's nothing left for him apart from to be a carriage driver or a gladiator. But that's an upper class view.
It was interesting.
Sorry, it's an upper class view from a bloke who was never in danger of being a gladiator.
Yeah.
And was never hungry.
I was struck. We talked about how the gladiators are kind of, male sex symbols, but there was also kind of strata in that as well. And so some of the gladiators were more sexy than others. The Retiarius was a very feminine gladiator. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. Initially, it seems really strange, doesn't it? And why any of them should be. It's probably because the Retiarius is the guy armed with a net and trident, and he has no shield, and the only armor he has is a metal sleeve on his left arm. He's so small shield, he hasn't got a shield type. But that dictates his style of fighting was at a distance and running around and being chased by the other guys. And in classical thinking, Greek or Roman, you start running away, it feminizes you, it demands you. And Juvenal reserves his most pungent distaste for retiarii. They lodge in the obscene part of the barracks.
Wow.
He doesn't actually expand on what makes them so obscene, but I think his readers can kind of then and now work it out. They're what used to be called in Victorian times, they're pathic. They're the passive partner in male sex. Which
and there's no concept of homosexuality. It was literally who was the penetrator and who was plug and socket, as people used to say.
Yeah, I mean, providing you're the plug, you're the active one, it doesn't really matter the gender of the person you're with.
Yeah.
But if you're the socket, if you're the passive one, this somehow or other is sought to unman you forever, no way back. And I'm afraid a Retiarius is just sort of somehow totally lined up with passive sexuality. I mean, that's one thing, of course, with neither Latin or Greek have any word like homosexual, heterosexual, bisexual. It does make you wonder if male Romans also found gladiators sexually desirable. I mean, there's really no evidence, but some of the visual images do sort of verge almost on looking like softcore porn. These are big, beefy, almost naked guys, portrayed in loving detail, doing penetrative things with swords. Yeah.
Yes.
Very
Read
masculine.
into that what you want. Yes.
I was struck with the range of materials you were drawing on, and this is your academic life. Have you been thinking about this for a while? Because some of them, you're talking about there's lots of single sources that give us a kind of fragment of information from which we can extrapolate something bigger. Have you been kind of kicking this book around for a while, or how did it all kind of start to come together into a coherent narrative?
Yeah, I have been thinking about doing a Gladiator book for ages, but until I read the Colin Jones Full of Robespierre book, I just couldn't think of a viewpoint, a stance, or a structure. And then when I did that, once I read that, I thought, 24 hours. I mean, I've used a 24-hour structure in a novel before, but that's kind of easy because it's a novel. Yeah. I can bend the time. Hell, I can put anything I like in the 24 hours. And then, I did an awful lot of work and research on this book because I thought I was kind of on top of the primary material. And then when I started researching it, I think you guys must have found this too. You start researching something, you think this is going to be quite easy. I really know about this period. And then you actually start looking at the original stuff and some modern scholarship. And it's a rabbit hole. You just find more and more things. Yeah. And there's always that slight, near the start, I always feel, I don't know if you two share this, feel slightly overwhelmed by the amount of material I'm just trying to process and think, God, I'll never get on top of this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was talking about just before you came on, actually, just because I'm researching at the moment a new novel, and I'm moving to a new time period for me, which is actually Imperial Rome. So I'm writing, and I don't know anything about it, and I'm just submerged under sort of piles of research, thinking, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to get my head above water? But I'm beginning to this has been sort of going on for a few weeks now.
But after a bit, you do, and you suddenly think, I'm pretty on top with it. And also, we do have to You had to draw a line somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, I suddenly realized at some point, I start thinking, well, actually, it doesn't. Most of this stuff that you read about doesn't matter when you're writing a novel, because it's just all in the background. You just sort of need to know the world, and lots of it just disappears into the ether. But it's there. It's sort of it's sort of in the. I don't know. It oozes into the story without becoming obvious. You don't need to tell everybody every piece of information.
You really, and as I hope all three of us do in novels, you've got to avoid the info dump.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing worse. I mean, the classic one was singled out by Robert Harris was Colleen McCulloch has this scene in which Julius Caesar and Brutus leave the Senate House and they turn left into the Archelaeum, which is there, and there are fast food stalls there, which were there. And then you get this sort of whole page of not only what they're selling, but how it's cooked and where the food is sourced from. And it ends with this sort of downbeat note, but they didn't stop to buy anything. And then Archie, while they're doing it, she also had Brutus and Julius Caesar telling each other stuff they already knew about the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
I think they might have tweaked how it worked before now.
Yeah, sounds like a good book to read for research, though. For me, just to sort of, if she did the research well, maybe a perfect info dump for me to pick up on.
Yeah, I actually reviewed that one for the TLS, and it wasn't the most positive review I've ever given. Everyone is characterized by their eyes. So, Julius Caesar, grey, intellectual, calculating. Cleopatra, tawny like a lioness and passionate. Guess what? Brutus, brown, weak, and shifty. Yeah.
And how sort of set in stone is the evidence? Because I'm thinking of, is archaeology adding much to this kind of period and stuff we know about the gladiators?
Yeah, it is. They've quite recently found by ground penetrating radar stuff that I don't really understand, another gladiatorial barracks on the northern frontier, which is cool. But the main way that archaeology is contributing at the minute is lots and lots of more gladiators' tombstones and relief sculptures. In fact, my boss at Lincoln College, Oxford, Professor Bert Smith, pinged me one that they've literally just dug up in Aphrodisias with a gladiatorial scene on. And we're trying to work out what types of gladiators they are. But we're not. And also interesting, it's gladiators and theatre stuff, which is a match you don't usually get. I mean, you get gladiators, obviously in the gladiatorial day, you get beast hunts in the morning, executions at lunchtime with some mimes maybe, and then the gladiators, but it's not usually twinned with the theatre. And so that's really interesting one. And I also, when I was in Macedon, as in northern Greece, early this year, and there's a new museum at Veria, and it's a treasure trove of gladiators' tombstones. And I so wished I'd seen some of them before I'd finished the book the year before, because one of them would have been the ideal ending to the book, where I talk about gladiators may well have been influenced by popular philosophy, and this might have influenced their mindset and a certain Stoic or Epicurean fatalism. And blimey, O'Reilly, I was wandering along photographing all these, and there's a gladiator's tombstone, and he quotes Epicurus about, death means nothing. Damn! If only I'd been there a year earlier.
We can change it for next edition.
I don't know about you two. I never go back for that idea. Really? when you've done a book, you've done it, and you talk about it for a bit, and then, I mean, by the time we're talking about books, we're all into the next book, aren't we?
Yeah, well into it,
or almost finished the next books in some cases. It's difficult to go back. And I'm always amazed when some writers do that. It's a little bit like when directors go back and do like a director's edit of their movies. I find that strange as well, although maybe not as time consuming. I don't know, maybe it is. But when Stephen King did, I remember The Stand, he went back and did like a remastered version of that or whatever, and he added, I don't know, 400 pages or something to the original 800-page book or something. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you just think, like, who's got that much time and energy to go back and revisit? Well, King did, but I don't know.
I mean, the only OUP did ask me if I want to do a second edition of my very first book, The Little Ancient Warfare, a very short introduction. I just went no. Quite frankly, no. Actually, I know I don't. Yeah, that's done. It's very long in the past. That's like 20 years ago. Yeah, scholarship's moved on, but I'm not going to. And if I was going to do that, I'd have to rewrite the entire book.
You just write a new book. Yeah, you just
Yeah,
write a new book,
exactly.
and you could say, part 2, or whatever, or revisited or something. It's just do a totally different.
I don't know. Maybe just give it a different title.
Yeah.
Don't want to minimise our sales here.
No, that's true. That's true.
So gladiators is something you'd find across the Roman Empire. I mean, we think of it in the Colosseum and these big kind of city events. But I know from York there was a gladiatorial bodies were dug up in York. So was it something that was kind of universal across the Roman Empire?
Yes, it was. Actually, the York thing, I mean, I agree with you entirely. I think that is a cemetery of gladiators. Tony Wilmot, the archaeologist, who was kind enough to read my manuscript to make sure, because I mean, I'm basically a historian and I do literature and art. I started off as a hands-off, dirty fingernails in the trench archaeologist, but I gave up really quickly because I don't like the outdoors much. He read the book and he is still not convinced those skeletons are necessarily gladiators. I think they are because they're all young men and a lot of them have the kind of repetitive strain injuries of training and the sort of injuries you'd expect for gladiators. But yeah, going back to your actual question, this is a rambling like some sort of politician trying to avoid the question, isn't it? Yeah, gladiatorial combat spreads out across the whole empire, and the reason it does is, well, it might just be because it's really exciting, but it's a way for the local elites to very expensively and very conspicuously show they're buying into Romanitas, the Roman way. Look how Roman we are. And I think that's really why it spreads. And the fact that, it may be morally distasteful to us, but it was probably really bloody exciting.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about Romanitas and the elites and the aristocracy. One of the things that I was most surprised about, actually, I hadn't really thought about before reading the book, was that the emperors were the biggest owners of gladiators. They had their own gladiatorial schools, and they owned basically thousands of gladiators. And on top of that some of them actually fought in the arenas. I'd always thought that was a conceit in Gladiator, when Commodus goes down and fights, and I thought this is all bollocks. No emperor ever did that. I'd never bothered researching it, but then finding out that they did actually, some of them go and fight in the Colosseum, although I'm sure not allowing themselves to be killed. But I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's the thing that surprised me when I did the research for the book, was that there were so many. And I already knew that the emperor very quickly becomes the biggest landowner in every province because he confiscates the estates of the condemned, and as a social expectation, members of the elite will leave him a gift in their wills. What I hadn't realised is almost instantly he becomes the biggest owner of gladiators. Actually, I did a bit of research on, not very deep research, lads, but on Board Game Geek, how many board games there are featuring gladiators. And the answer appeared to be 181.
Wow.
And so I bought some because I am a bit of a geek. I mean, obviously, as a classicist, bar for the course. Actually, it's compulsory. And I read through them, and we don't know enough for me to criticize, the actual fighting bit of the games. But they all have a sort of campaign career bit. And that's when it all went wrong. Because you start off as a Lannister, an owner of a small troop out in the sticks. And if you're successful, you end up putting on shows in the Colosseum. No, you didn't.
Yeah, but that's because of the film Gladiator, isn't it? They've got that kind of idea, I suppose.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're a commercial Lannister, it'd make a weird game and really quite dull. What you actually, yes, you can put on commercial shows, the Assi Farana, which probably didn't cost an ass, a small coin. I mean, a penny dreadful doesn't cost you a penny. It's just a value judgment that it's a shite novel. But what you spent most of your time as commercialists doing is renting your troupe out to members of the local elite for them to put on shows. And there's a great bit of a legal text that if you rent a gladiator, say for 2,000 sesterces, cool. But if he gets killed or maimed, you owe the Lanista 50 times that. And that suddenly jumps it to 100,000 sesterces, a tenth of the property qualification of a senator, the richest men in the empire. And it goes back, I think, Matthew's point you made, that these are really expensive items. When you've trained a guy up, there's a whole lot of reasons not to kill him. And one is economic. It's a really expensive investment you'll be giving the thumbs down to.
Yeah, I mean, if they consider, I mean, if they're all infames, they're the lowest of the low, aren't they? And in terms of society, like slaves, and some of them are slaves. But the fact that they're basically seen to be talking property, I suppose, in the mind of Romans at the time. But it's like somebody now saying, I'm going to rent you out my Lamborghini to do some racing in. If you trash the car and drive it in, off a cliff or something, they're not going to be very happy. They expect to bring your car back, maybe with a scratch, but not completely trashed.
Nice analogy, yeah. Mind you, if you rent someone's Lamborghini, it's probably going to cost a fortune to kick off with.
Yeah, but I guess it costs more if you completely trash it.
Yeah, you'll be selling your house after that, won't you?
I guess in a really grim way, that means that a very kind of ostentatious display of wealth would be a gladiatorial games where there's a high death count, because people will know this is a very expensive thing to do, to kill gladiators.
How magnanimous am I? How open-handed? I've put on these games, and money means nothing. All that matters is pleasing you. Yeah, absolutely. So a push-pull thing for the giver of the games, who is always expected to consult the spectators. He doesn't have to follow their spare him or kill him, but if he goes against them, it undercuts the whole reason he's paying for this really elaborate show, which is to gain popularity with the locals. So I guess he would usually follow them. And by the way, the thumbs up, thumbs down thing, every modern scholar claims the modern popular understanding is the wrong way round, and thumbs up means death, thumbs down means life. And I bothered to hunt this back. Every scholar cites one article by a man called Corbeil or something like that, way years ago. So I found it and I read it, and there's an awful lot of weird stuff about phallic imagery and penises, which I just couldn't.
Was it from the 60s?
I think it was 70s, but it was some weird shit going on there. But his only basic argument was that the literary mentions we have about the thumb, it just says the thumb turns, doesn't say which way. And he argues up means death because it's the killing blow into the throat. No, not at all, because the gladiatorial cemetery in Ephesus, and these really definitely are gladiators, there's no doubt about it. Almost all the killing blows are from above, behind, and down. So I disagree with every other modern scholar who's written about it. I think popular image is right.
But it's great. The truth is here.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, modern day gladiatorial combat doesn't really exist, but I've been to what's possibly the closest thing, which was a bullfight in Spain. I used to live in Spain, and I lived in Spain for a long time back in the 80s. I know bullfights now are getting banned in certain areas of Spain, and it's not as common as it was. But then it was like football on TV. You literally have on Saturday afternoon, it would be the bullfight would be on, and in certain festivals it would be day after day. And the bull ring in Madrid where I went, it's like a Colosseum. I mean, it's very, very similar. It's got it's the same shape, and you sit in when you buy a ticket, the cheaper tickets are the sun tickets. You're sitting in the sun, so you get sol or sombra, or the shade, or sol y sombra, where you get a bit of both as the sun goes round. And the price is much more expensive if you sit in the shade, because it's just like in Italy, it's bloody hot, and you don't want to sit in the sun. And it's very, very similar in all of this. But when they kill the bulls, it's with a downward, into the back of the neck. Yeah, and when they this is, I mean, if anybody doesn't want to hear about gory stuff about animals getting hurt, obviously this far into the podcast, we've been talking about
fine,
but killed. But if you don't want to hear about it, but they get hurt, and then they fall to their knees, and when they do the final sort of coup de grace of killing them, they come in with a small dagger, just behind the back of the neck, and they just kill them. And you see them drop instantly because, of course, they cut through the spinal column, and
which is almost identical to the gladiator death blow.
That's
and of course,
that's why I imagine it would be at the end, because you just want to put some out of their misery. You don't want to have them there whimpering and whatever. I suppose at the end of it, you want to just kill them if they're going to get killed.
Also, the other gladiator doesn't want to kill him necessarily. I mean, he could well be from the same troop. He could be a cellmate, and of course, it avoids any eye contact. If you, the victor, are standing behind the guy, one downward blow like the bull.
Yeah.
My only experience of bullfighting is while researching the novel, I read Hemingway's Death in the Afternoon, and I did go to a Provençal bullfight in the amphitheatre at Arles,
right?
Which is actually in a Roman amphitheatre.
Wow.
They don't Provençal bullfighting. They don't kill the bull. They do some fancy manoeuvres and pluck flowers from between the horns.
Yeah,
but it was still pretty exciting.
And is it a direct descent from the gladiatorial combats?
Justin, I don't know. I'm not qualified to say. It's the kind of thing everyone's going to go, yes, it must be. But is it really? I mean, an awful lot happened between the fall of the Roman Empire, or the end of gladiatorial combats, and the end of beast fights, which would be in the 500s AD, and the first recorded bullfight in Provence. I'll just leave that. I'm going to sidestep that one. I just don't. It's always important intellectual honesty, lads. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, of course, but it would be very interesting to do a bit of a deep dive in the history of bullfighting in Spain and when it started, because I think it would be quite an amazing coincidence that it would just suddenly happen, that it wasn't a progression in some way. I mean, it seems too similar.
The same venues,
and the venue. I mean, if you go to Ventas in Madrid, I mean, it's. I think it was built in the 19th century, but it's just the same as the Colosseum, really. It's and the experience, I'm sure, is very, very similar. Sitting there, people bringing drinks around. You're sitting there, getting a drink and watching people. I saw a bullfighter get gored, possibly killed. I don't know, because he got carted off and taken to hospital. So you've got, you're getting animals killed, you're getting people hurt badly, or killed, and it's very visceral and like you said, very exciting. I mean, I went as a teenage. I was like 15, 16 years old, and very exciting. I mean, there's no two ways about it. And whether you disagree with the cruelty to animals or whatever, there's no taking away from the fact that it's an exciting thing.
It's visceral. I mean, it's life and death.
And it's the excitement of it that was the reason for the only opposition in the ancient world to gladiatorial combat. There's very little opposition. There used to be the idea the Greeks were anti it, but that was based mainly on the fact Victorian scholars thought the Greeks were nicer blokes than the Romans, and they didn't build lots of amphitheatres. Well, A, they weren't nicer blokes. There are hundreds of inscriptions about gladiators in the Greeks, and B, they didn't need to build amphitheatres. They had stone theatres they could convert and stone running tracks, stadia they could convert. The only opposition is from a handful of philosophers who happen to be all Greek. But what really struck me is they're not in the least bit concerned about the poor devils who are sweating, fighting, scared, dying, being mutilated out in the middle. Their opposition is for you, the spectator, because gladiatorial combat is so damned exciting. You, that member of the elite reading this book, might lose your self-control. And if you lose that, a basic building block of elite Roman and Greek identity, you reduce yourself to no better than the plebs, maybe even no better than barbarians or the guys out on the sand. And it's a wonderfully reverse way. We'd imagine there would be opposition, the terrible cruelty to the men fighting and dying. Not a bit of it. Couldn't care less. It's all about the guys in the stands. Might have a bad moral effect on them. I mean, the Romans... It's things, the great Mary Renault, the great novelist, said something in the lines of the great attraction of reading and writing about the past is the similarities and differences. Sometimes they're so like us, other times they suddenly are just so different. And that would have been much more effective if I could have remembered the quote, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I understand the sentiment, and I think it's true, isn't it? We always sort of say when talking about writing fiction, historical fiction, about how you've got to try to ground. There's enough of similarity between people in the past and now. When people had children and loved their children, loved their family, and were grieved and loved and hated, and all these different things. They had the same physical sensations as us, but obviously their outlook on life could be so extraordinarily alien.
Yeah.
And at times so incredibly similar, like you say. And one of the things that I've been seeing about ancient Rome and reading about the imperial Rome and the city itself is just how incredibly similar to life in a modern city it was. People eating out mostly because normal people, because they didn't have the ovens and things in their houses, so most of them are eating out at taverns and sort of eateries and things, living in high rise, maybe not 50 floors, but maybe 5 or 6 stories, and living these sort of narrow streets. 1 million people all stuck in there, food being imported in because they couldn't grow it all locally. And I mean, it's very similar, and all the shenanigans between all the politics of the time and the Senate, and looking at modern day like America now, and how easy it is to manipulate the masses one way or another, and in the UK as well, I guess, and how similar that was in terms of like buying people's votes. And I don't know, just very, very similar. Not much has changed in 2,000 years.
No, I agree with absolutely all of that. And then suddenly their mentality is as alien as a tribe in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, because they are slavery isn't contested. Yes. Some people are instruments with voices, and then you have all those sort of terrifying stories. My favourite about that is Galen, the Great Doctor, and in an autobiographical fragment, he writes about his father and mother. His father was very chill-blooded. His mother was horrible, very bad-tempered. She used to stab her maids with scissors and things because they did her hair wrong. But his dad was very chill, and one of his father's friends actually punched a slave he owned in the mouth. And Galen's dad goes, no, that's a very, very bad thing to do. You really shouldn't do that. No mention of the guy who's just been punched. It's because, there's a serious danger that you might cut your knuckles horribly on his teeth. And what you should do is send another slave to get a big stick, and then you beat the offending slave in your own sweet time. And you do it in a nice, calm, rational way. And you don't lose any self-control, and your knuckles don't get cut. And I read that anecdote, and I thought, this is just so alien from our thinking. Couldn't care less about the guy who's just bleeding from the mouth on the floor. Who cares?
Well, we've been Christianized, of course, in Tom Holland's opinion. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It's probably a good place to start bringing this to a close. And we've been talking for about an hour, and now talking about people being losing their humanity. Maybe that's like the way we should be drawing a veil over this. But before we go, I was going to ask you. You mentioned before about how when we talk about a book, we're writing another one, or we're well into writing another one. So what are you working on now? What's next?
Right. I'm working on another non-fiction book. I want to do one more history book before I return to historical novels. And I'm trying to work on a big sweeping social history of Rome from birth to death.
Wow.
And hopefully it'll come together. And the thing is that, of course, the non-fiction books take longer than the fiction. The initial research is about the same, but I think you sort of alluded to this earlier, Matthew, that in a novel, when we're doing a novel, you do the research and you find there are 3 different modern interpretations, and you can think, right, I'll go for A because that's the one I like best. I needn't even mention B and C. Maybe I'll put them in an endnote. You can't do that in non-fiction. I mean, I can't just go, that's the answer.
Or of course you can do the other thing and say there's 3 interpretations, but I think there's a 4th interpretation because it makes more sense for my story, and you could just do that. So then you can say at the end note, I've decided to make up that they went to this other place instead. But you can't do that, definitely. But we can do that in fiction.
We can do it in fiction. Mind you, there's nothing better in non-fiction than actually coming up with a new interpretation.
Yes,
I mean, that's the bit that really excites me. I look at the visual image and think, hang on a sec. No one's ever thought about it like this. And that's the moment you think, that makes it all worthwhile.
That's brilliant.
That and the occasional nice review on the internet, when it isn't made up names telling us we can't write.
So this sounds like a huge project. Have you got a kind of structure that you're going to fit it in, or you're just going to start at the beginning and go through?
No, I've got a structure. What I'm going to do is I was going to start with an intro chapter, setting it in political context. And then I'm going to start with a chapter on birth and childhood. And then we're going to go through to death, but taking in everything that, kind of matters then and now, like family, friends, sex, entertainment, religion. And each one is going to be introduced by a different monument in Rome or a visual image. And so, yeah, it can almost act as a guidebook, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big, big project. It'll take me another 18 months to finish. So, and then I think it's time to write some more fiction, because I'm kind of missing Ballista and his familiar. And just write, and jokes. It's easier to put jokes in novels.
Yeah.
I try and put some humor in the fiction, in the non-fiction, but you can't write dark. Well, having said all of which, in Those Who Are About to Die, each chapter is introduced by a little paragraph of fiction.
Yeah.
Carefully in italics, so every reader knows this bit's fiction. The bit in normal text, it is the history. But I thought that was kind of a way of dropping the reader into the middle of something.
Absolutely, yeah, and it works. And I've got one final question from me you've written a lot of fiction and a lot of non-fiction. Which do you prefer? If you could only do one for the rest of your life, now, if somebody said, well, that's it, you can continue writing for 20, 30 years, but it's only got to be fiction, or it's only going to be non-fiction, which would you choose?
Oh, that's a real bastard.
That's the choice. That's it.
Okay,
to your head.
It's going to be fiction, because I only became an academic under the misapprehension they didn't do much. And I always wanted to be a novelist. And I thought I'd get such long holidays as a Don, I could write a novel in the summer. I was wrong on both counts. A, you don't get lots of time off. And B, I'd like to see anyone write a decent novel in 3 months. But yeah, it would probably be fiction, but I'd miss the history.
Okay. So that's a good answer. And it basically means you'd write historical fiction like us, because we've got the best of both worlds, then, you see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much for coming on and for telling us about Gladiators. And
yeah, thank you, Harry.
And everything else.
Thanks for having me. That was actually a lot of fun, blokes. That was really, really a good one.
Oh, brilliant. And best of luck for this book, which has only just recently come out, hasn't it? And best of luck for the new one. Really looking forward to seeing that when it materializes in 2 or 3 years' time, I suppose, by the time it actually comes out.
Yeah, it'll be at least 27, won't it?
Yeah.
If not 28. Well, thank you very much, and best of luck with your new projects, guys.
Thank you.
Cheers.
So that was great. Good fun.
It's fabulous. And really good book.
Yeah, the book is really good. I wish I'd managed to finish it before he came on, but I'm well into it. And you said to me earlier this afternoon that you're about a third of the way through.
Yeah.
And I said I was about the same. And I looked at it again today. And have you seen how much of the book is footnotes and endnotes and whatever, endnotes and references? It's literally about 100 pages at the end. It's tons of it.
I'm about halfway through then.
Yeah, it's a load of it. It's a lot. So I was flipping through and I saw the acknowledgements, and it's like about 100 pages to go after the acknowledgements is all the endnotes. But yeah, great book. Very, very accessible. If anyone wants to sort of get a general idea about the history of not just gladiators, but of Rome, I think, as well. And then mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it really is about how people thought about gladiators, how gladiators interact with society, what gladiators tell us about Roman society. It's hugely in depth, really great read, and fascinating. It's
given me lots of food for thought for my own stories, for the book that I'm writing. Just lots of little information, like you say, because it covers lots of gamuts of society and the way they think about things, and how gladiators fit within the strata of society, and all the different stigmas attached to their level within society. And so, of course, by talking about all of these things, Harry has to give you more of the background and explain more of the levels of the tiers of society and the different ranks and everything. and how people fit into that society. And of course, all those things are really helping me with understanding how my characters are going to fit within that larger world. So yeah, really interesting. I didn't think it would be the kind of book that would be good sort of background reading. It felt much more targeted, that it was like, if you don't, if I'm not writing about gladiators, it wouldn't be interesting. But actually, anybody that's interested in that period of history will be interested, I think.
Yeah, it wanders away from gladiators for quite long stretches.
Yes, a lot, yeah. But in an interesting way, and I think it does it very, very well. And I think from hearing him speak now, people get the you get the gist of what he's like as an academic and as a writer. I mean, I think I've only read one of his novels. I think it might have been his first one, of his Warrior of Rome series, and it's really, really good writing. So yeah, he's a very good writer. So I think that's it. That's it for today's episode, and we hope everyone's enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed recording it. Don't forget, as I said at the beginning, to leave a review for the podcast. It really is helpful. And thanks to all of our Patreons or patrons on Patreon, and a special shout out to our Patreon producers. And that's Adam Turner, Ben Mayer, Andy Maxwell, Ben Fox, Daryl Hare, and George Johnson. Thank you, guys.
You can sign up on Patreon to support us from as little as £1 per month, or buy us a beer at the link tree in the show notes.
Until next time, a rock, paper, swords. It's goodbye from me, Matthew Harffy.
And it's goodbye from me, Justin Hill.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind.
Stay safe.
And happy reading.